I beg to move that a bill entitled An Act to Vary the Appropriation of Sums, the issue of which was authorized by the Appropriation, Financial Year 2021, Act 2020, and varied by the Finance, Supplementation, and Variation of Appropriation, Financial Year 2021, Act 2021, be now read a second time.
Minister, I remind you, you have 45 minutes.
Thank you, Madam President. I would not be taking all of that time. The bill before us, Madam President, has been passed in the other place. The bill provides for the variation of the 2021 appropriation in the sum of $574,889,840. And this is to bring to account expenditure funded by advances from the Treasury deposits in fiscal 2021. One of the main, or let me elaborate on the main reasons for which additional funding of $574,889,840 is being proposed by way of a variation of appropriation. Firstly, under Head 03, Judiciary, an increase of $35,195,944 is being sought to retire an advance made from Treasury deposits that facilitated payment to vendors who provided security and telephone services, as well as rental or lease of office accommodation for the judiciary. Secondly, under Head 17, Personnel Department, an increase of $8,640,671 is also being sought to retire an advance, again made from Treasury deposits, that facilitated payment for the rental and lease of office accommodation for the department, and the renewal of software licenses, and to vendors who provided consultancy services and janitorial services for the Personnel Department, which is also known as the Chief Personnel Officers Department. Finally, under Head 78, Ministry of Social Development and Family Services, an increase of $531,053,225 is being sought to retire again an advance from Treasury deposits that enabled the payment of grants in respect of senior citizens, public assistance, and disability grants. I would ask Honourable Senators to note that in accordance with Section 17(1)(b) of the Exchequer and Audit Act, Chapter 6901, advances made from Treasury deposits are recoverable within 12 months after the close of the financial year in which the advances are made. It is also a requirement that the accounts for a particular fiscal year be closed within 4 months of the expiry of the fiscal year. And therefore, the deadline date for this matter is the 31st of January 2022. The $574,889,840 is being taken from Head 18, the Ministry of Finance. And that following a final review of the 2021 accounts by the Budget Division, savings were identified by the Ministry of Finance under various sub-items where the amounts spent or disbursed were less than the funding allocated in fiscal 2021. And may I make a point, Madam President, at this time, that the very fact that the documents laid in the Parliament in both houses during the budget exercise are defined as estimates should give an idea that the budget division at the beginning of a fiscal year makes its best estimate based on requests made to it based on an analysis of funding and expenditure in previous years and based on programs and projects that have been approved by Cabinet and also ongoing programs and projects. The Budgets Division makes its best estimate of what the expenditure will be under all the items and sub-items contained within the estimates of expenditure. For this reason, we have a mid-year review, which is what I referred to a little while ago, where if it is determined that a department or ministry requires additional funding and funding is not available within its overall allocation, that we come to the Parliament in the mid-year review. Quite often, we do a variation of appropriation or a supplementation of appropriation, variation being where you just move money from one head to another, from one ministry to another. You need parliamentary approval for that. Or a supplementation where it is felt that additional funding is required to increase the total appropriation for the year. And then we come to this point where we do the closing of the accounts. Now, we did not do this last year, Madam President, because there were no variations between heads. Variations can be done within a head so that a permanent secretary is authorized to do virements within items within an overall head. So let's just take the Ministry of Education, for example. The permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education is authorized to move funding from one sub-item, let us say contract officers, to another item, let us say gratuities, so that within a head there can be transfers that does not require the approval of Parliament. What requires the approval of Parliament is when we move money from one head, in this case Head 18, Ministry of Finance, to other heads, in this case the three heads that I've mentioned: Judiciary, Personnel Department, and Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. The total increase in the head of expenditure, in the heads of expenditure that I just mentioned, the three items, is 574,889,840, and the total decrease in the Ministry of Finance is an equivalent amount of $574,889,840, which produces a nil net effect. What this means is that the appropriation for 2021, fiscal 2021, is not being adjusted at this time. So if I move on now to the specific matters, there are some issues that need to be elaborated upon. I will start first with the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services. And I think it's very, very important to let members know that over the last 3 years, I've asked the Budget Division to give me the figures for the last 3 years, and this is just for information only. There has been a constant increase in the expenditure on the senior citizens' pension. And in 2021, fiscal 2021, the actual expenditure so far that we have come up with for this closing of the accounts on senior citizens grant, one of the items, one of the heads, sub-items that we are moving money to. In 2021, the government spent $4,237,063,733 on senior citizens pension. Let me repeat that. In fiscal 2021, the Budget Division has advised me that the government spent $4,237,063,733, and the total number of recipients of senior citizens pension in 2021 was 109,132. And when one goes back a couple of years, we'll see that that figure has gone up by 10,000 in the last 2 to 3 years. So it's a significant item, and this is why I commend the Minister of Social Development for her efforts in rooting out duplication, wastage, fraud, and unauthorized payments within this system. Because as a country, this is a staggering amount of money. $4,237 million on an unfunded pension arrangement where senior citizens do not make contributions to this pension system, but receive a pension once they attain the age of 65 and they meet the income criteria to be in receipt of a senior citizen's pension. There are few countries in the world, Madam President, that do this. I can't think of any at this point in time in our hemisphere that provides a pension of this magnitude to this amount of people in an unfunded situation. This is part of the social safety net in Trinidad and Tobago, and it needs to be emphasized. $4.237 billion in fiscal 2021 on senior citizens' pension. In addition, I am advised that with respect to social assistance, public assistance as it is also called, in 2021, the expenditure was $352 million, $352,754,469. And there were 18,430 persons on the list in terms of beneficiaries of public assistance. With respect to urgent temporary assistance, when people have problems with a fire or other natural disaster, the expenditure was $11,309,982. With respect to the disability grant, there I am seeing 22,856 persons with disabilities receiving a disability grant for a total of $622,617,199. A total of just these 3 grants, these 4 grants: senior citizens, social assistance, urgent temporary assistance, disability, $5,223,745,383. $5.2 billion spent by this government on these grants in 1 year, fiscal 2021. And what we do in the Ministry of Finance, and what I know the Minister of Social Development is doing, is constantly reviewing all of these grants to see, as I said, where there are areas of leakage because of the huge sums of money involved, and the fact that it has been established that persons who may have passed away, persons who are no longer eligible for the senior citizens pension, for example, because they are in receipt of some other income that exceeds the limit, persons who no longer qualify to be on social assistance for one reason or another, and may have got a job, and so on. The Minister of Social Development is constantly reviewing these huge numbers and these huge numbers of beneficiaries. When I add up everything here, what I'm seeing, Madam President, is over 150,000 beneficiaries of just these 4 grants in fiscal 2021. And therefore, at the beginning of the year, the Budget Division does an estimate based on what it expects the expenditure to be, but despite the best efforts of the government and the minister in particular, we had to supplement the allocation in fiscal 2021, and that is the reason why we are asking for approval today to retire Treasury deposits in the sum of $531 million, which was sent to the Ministry of Social Development to deal with these social grants. There were some other issues. The movement of money from Head 18 was in a number of areas. I'm starting with the government assistance for tuition expenses, and I am advised that in that particular year, the GATE fund is a rolling fund, and therefore the fund has money in it at the beginning of every fiscal year. So what the government does in the budget exercise is it tops up the gate fund so that in fiscal 2021, there was no requirement to spend all of the money that had been appropriated for the gate fund because there was a balance in the fund at the beginning of the year, and that was sufficient together with the appropriations that were actually made to allow persons who access gate in fiscal 2021 to receive assistance for their tuition expenses. With respect to the Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company, I was advised that the TTMF received funding over a period of years, and in fiscal 2021, I am told, this is the information that I have received from the budget division, that loans totaling $463 million were disbursed by TTMF in fiscal 2021, and we continue to support TTMF in fiscal 2022. And the reason for the support is the fact that the government has a mortgage loan interest program where two types of interest arrangements are provided. One at 2%, which is for the lower level of mortgage loans, and one at 5% when persons cross a certain threshold in terms of the amount of money that they are seeking to borrow from the TTMF. The interest rate is 5%, but it is still lower than the bank rate in many instances. So what the government does, and what governments have done for many years, is the government makes up the difference between the 2% and what the prevailing mortgage interest rate is. There's a cost associated with that, and this subsidy of mortgages has been facilitated by numerous governments over the last 20 or 30 years. And the principle is that the government makes up the difference between the interest rate charged, let's use the 2% as an example, and what the proper bank rate would be. And that is a benefit that the numerous governments have made available to its citizens when they avail themselves, particularly of public housing, through the Trinidad and Tobago Mortgage Finance Company. With respect to the other two items where money was available, there was a loan facility for UDCOT, and there was no requirement to make this money available in cash in 2021, and what was done instead was that the financing was refinanced, and this is part of debt management. Every year, the Ministry of Finance, particularly the Debt Management Unit, will look at loans that are maturing during the fiscal year, and decisions will be made to refinance some of them or to pay off some of them. When you pay off a loan, you have to have the cash flow in your government account at the central bank that will facilitate a utilization of cash, so that as the year progresses, the government will make decisions. Sometimes loans that were earmarked for refinancing, once the cash flow is available, the government will pay those off. Other times, when there is insufficient space within the overdraft facility, the loans will be refinanced. And this is what occurred with these two loans, the one for UDCOT and the loan for ETEC. The ETEC loan was for the development of the Vanguard Hotel. This is a loan that would have been taken out long ago. The Vanguard Hotel is now called the Magdalena, and this loan would have been taken out, maybe 20 years, 10 years before. It was a loan provided by First Citizens Bank, and the facility was refinanced by the government as part of its debt management. Similarly, the UDCOT loan was an FCB loan, and it was the repayment of a loan, previous loan, that had matured and was refinanced. So those are the 4 areas where funding was taken. I would also indicate that funding was also made available from an allocation for the Agricultural Development Bank, and that was because the Ministry facilitated, the Ministry of Finance facilitated all requests available, so all requests made to it by the Agricultural Development Bank for funding. Again, the ADB is a bank that engages in tremendous subsidy, provides loans at rates way below the market rate, and exercises tremendous forbearance in terms of dealing with borrowers. And therefore, the ADB needs to be supported financially to make up the difference between the cost of the loans that it makes to the agricultural sector, the write-off of debts and so on in the sector, and the actual prices at which these loans are made available to the agricultural sector. During the period, there was no requirement to spend all of the money made available in the budget to the ADB, and I would think that COVID-19 may have had something to do with that, or it may very well be that the ADB had improved its operations and therefore did not require reliance to that extent on the Ministry of Finance to make up the shortfall in what it charges for loans and what it receives for loans, Madam President. So that I want to confine my contribution today to these narrow areas. I am advised that this is what the standing orders require, that this debate is confined simply to the matters related to the movement of funds from the Ministry of Finance to the 3 areas and the purposes of the money used by these 3 areas and explanations for the availability of funds from the Ministry of Finance. And I think I have covered everything, and I beg to move, Madam President.